Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. We're going to begin with that 60 Minutes interview where former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe said there were discussions about using the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. In his new book, The Threat, How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump, McCabe details his concerns about the president's possible connections to Russia. McCabe was named acting FBI director after the firing of James Comey in May 2017. He also oversaw investigations into Russian election interference and Hillary Clinton's emails. McCabe was fired last March, one day before his retirement. The Justice Department claims McCabe misled prosecutors about leaks to the media. He denies those allegations. In a wide-ranging interview with 60 Minutes' Scott Pelley, McCabe delves into why he opened investigations into the president. Here is some of their conversation about the first moments after Comey was fired.
I was speaking to the man who had just run for the presidency and won the election for the presidency, and who might have done so with the aid of the government of Russia, our most formidable adversary on the world stage. And that was something that troubled me greatly.
How long was it after that you decided to start the obstruction of justice and counterintelligence investigations involving the president?
I think the next day I met with the team investigating the Russia cases, and I asked the team to go back and conduct an assessment to determine where are we with these efforts and what steps do we need to take going forward. I was very concerned that I was able to put the Russia case on absolutely solid ground in an indelible fashion, that were I removed quickly or reassigned or fired, that the case could not be closed or vanish in the night without a trace. I wanted to make sure that our case was on solid ground, and if somebody came in behind me and closed it and tried to walk away from it, they would not be able to do that without creating a record of why they'd made that decision.
You wanted a documentary record.
That's right.
That those investigations had begun because you feared that they would be made to go away.
That's exactly right.
CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reid joins me now from the White House. Hi, Paula. The president has long gone after McCabe. So what is his reaction to this interview?
Well, Tanya, today he has taken to Twitter where he has blasted McCabe as a liar, reminding people that he was fired from the FBI, not by the president, but by the FBI for not being fully honest about his contacts with reporters. And then in his tweet, you can see he uses McCabe as an example of what he believes is partisan bias within his own Justice Department and FBI. Specifically, he argues that the Justice Department was easy on his opponent in the election, Hillary Clinton, in the investigation into her use of a private server, and then opened an investigation into him. He alleges this was an insurance policy after he won to prevent him from being successful. Now, there were two investigators who were involved in both of those investigations, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and their text messages have been made public, and it's clear that they expressed a lot of anti-Trump sentiment and bias against him and his supporters. Now, they're both pushed off of the investigation and are no longer with the Justice Department. But independent of those two, we have to remind people that the former Attorney General, the acting Attorney General, the now new Attorney General, William Barr, the Deputy Attorney General, the current FBI Director, they were all appointed by the president. And when any of them have been asked about the Russia investigation, none of them have come out and said, yes, I believe it's a hoax, or yes, I believe it's riddled with partisanship. So the president believes, though, that Andrew McCabe is just an example of how the Justice Department is not fair to him.
And Paula, when reports came out last year that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein suggested wearing a wire, we were led to believe that was in jest. But it seems McCabe is saying it was a serious consideration. What more do we know about this, and how is the Justice Department reacting?
Well, Tanya, I've spoken to several people who were in that meeting, and no one disputes that these issues were raised. The idea of a wire or the idea of invoking the 25th Amendment. The disagreement, however, is over interpretation. McCabe believes that these were serious suggestions, and this was something that the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, actually wanted to pursue. But Rod Rosenstein and some other people in that meeting say, no, he was clearly joking. He would never suggest such a thing in that particular forum, an open meeting with lots of different people. Now, today, the Justice Department has released a statement. And specifically when it comes to this idea of wearing a wire to record incriminating statements by the president, they deny that Rod Rosenstein authorized a wire. Now, that wording is very important because essentially what they're saying is, look, yes, this was raised, but it was never actually pursued. And that's really where we are in terms of this dispute. And it's up to our viewers to decide who they believe.
And what about the suggestion to invoke the 25th Amendment, though? Is the indication that that was discussed but not authorized?
Exactly. The idea that, yes, it was discussed, but Rod Rosenstein argues it wasn't serious. McCabe says he believes it was. Now, today, the Justice Department pushed back on that, saying, look, Rod Rosenstein does not believe, he's on the record, he does not believe there's any basis to remove the president from office. And, Tanya, I think it's also important to think about the context of the time back in May of 2016. It doesn't seem to ring true that Rod Rosenstein would have believed there actually was a legitimate chance of the president's cabinet. I think John Kelly, Jeff Sessions, Ben Carson, Governor Perry, that these folks would be at a point just a few months into the president's tenure where they would want to band together to oust him and replace him with Mike Pence. And even if Rod Rosenstein was serious about that suggestion, whether or not he would actually bring it up in a meeting like this. There are aspects to that just don't quite make sense about this as a serious suggestion. But again, I wasn't in the room. Andrew McCabe was, and he believes Rosenstein was serious.
All right, Paula, I also want to ask about Paul Manafort. A judge ruled yesterday that the former Trump campaign chairman breached his plea deal by lying to the special counsel. What does this mean for Manafort, and where might the special counsel go from here?
Well, Tanya, Manafort is likely now to spend the rest of his life in jail. He's 69 years old. If he had followed through with his plea agreement, they were going to cap part of his sentence at 10 years, and he would likely be able to serve that along with another sentence he faces at the same time. He faced a decent chance of getting out of jail within a decade. But now that he's violated this, the judge said, look, the special counsel has no obligation to you to seek a lighter sentence. His only chance of not spending the rest of his life in jail is a presidential pardon. That is something the president has historically said he has not taken off the table for Manafort. So right now, that's his only really possibility of not spending the rest of his life behind bars. Now, in terms of what this tells us about where the special counsel investigation is headed, we know from former, after this vote that just took place, confirming William Barr, soon to be former acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, said the special counsel investigation is wrapping up soon. But in its final weeks or months, we've learned from the Manafort case that they're looking very closely at a meeting Manafort had with an associate with known ties to Russian intelligence. We know that during that meeting, Manafort shared some polling data. And the big question that we're all waiting for an answer to is, why? Was this part of a conspiracy on behalf of the campaign, or was this Manafort just pursuing his own business interests, trying to make some money? What was it about this meeting, and why did he take that meeting, but then why did he lie? Not only just lie at the outset, but lie as part of a cooperation deal. Why would he risk more prison time to cover up what happened? That's really what we think the investigators are honing in on, what we're all waiting for answers on.
So many questions surrounding that meeting. But Paula, Attorney General nominee William Barr got enough votes to be confirmed today, as expected. What questions still remain about how he will handle the Mueller probe?
Two big questions. The first is, what would he do if the special counsel came up with evidence of possible criminal wrongdoing by the president? You cannot indict, according to the Justice Department, a sitting president. So he would have to decide whether or not to take any evidence and pass it along to Congress for possible impeachment. But he's been on the record about his views about executive power, what is and is not obstruction of justice. And Tanya, he's shown to take a very expansive view of executive power. He said, for example, firing an FBI chief. A president cannot obstruct justice by doing that. That person serves at the president's pleasure. So it'll be very interesting to see how he handles that if that happens. One thing we do know is certainly going to happen is eventually the special counsel will give him a report, a final report on all of its findings, and that will contain confidential information. And Barr has said that he is willing to release some of the findings, at least a summary, and be as transparent as he can. But Tanya, typically the Justice Department doesn't release what is called confidential information. And I think a lot of people are going to be very disappointed or surprised about just how little he is legally obligated to share. So we're all waiting to see just how much he shares. The House Democrats have said anything short of the full report being published, That will prompt them to issue subpoenas for the special counsel and/or that report.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky balance to strike between transparency and protecting that confidential information. Paula Reid in Washington, thank you.